Hello, I am Gepwin, and this is the first episode of Kerbal Fuel Crisis R&D. I'm doing this for a couple reasons, because people are honking outside. One is because I've gotten a couple of requests to show more shipbuilding in my series, and unfortunately, the way that I build the ships and test the ships is not really conducive to the way that the series is set up. So I'm going to start doing some other little bits where I show other videos where I show some of the testing and building, and then stick to the more story stuff in the continuation of the Fuel Crisis series. The other reason I want to do it is to give everyone periodic updates on how things are going, especially right now since it's been quite a while since the last episode of Fuel Crisis went up, and I do apologize. Anybody who's been following the channel knows that I took a little bit of time off to figure out what I wanted to do with my videos in the future, make sure that the quality stayed up and that I was doing something that I thought everyone would enjoy. And also, now that I'm trying to get back into the Fuel Crisis series, the game itself is being a bit bothersome. I'm trying to figure out how to get the mods working well together again, and every time I start recording, the game periodically freezes about once every 5 minutes, which is really putting a damper on recording. But new episodes are coming, and I wanted to do this as a little update/build video. So what we're having here is the ship that is going to hopefully be the last fuel tanker I need to build. As you may know, the fuel tankers are actually one of the harder things that I do in this series, because they need to bring a lot of kethane fuel from the site to the launch pad, and they need to be able to do it consistently and fairly quickly. I mean, quickly is obviously not always essential, but since I have to make these runs in the background of the other video, or sometimes I show you them in the video, but it's always the same, so it gets a little repetitive. I wanted to make something that's reliable and fast that I could just use whenever I needed to make a kethane run, and not have to have a new one built every episode, which is what was happening because they all had some design flaws. So I decided to just sit down, make one that was going to be the end-all and be-all of the fuel tankers. And this is actually the fourth iteration of what I've been trying to do. I was hoping for a VTOL design originally, which was working okay on the runway, and I was hoping that I could use a VTOL to then take off on the rocky, craggy areas where the kethane mine is. Unfortunately, one of the main problems with building a kethane tanker is the fact that when it is full, the center of gravity is very much, or the center of mass, is very much not in the same place anymore. It actually moves quite a bit depending on whether the tanks are full or empty, and since you cannot tweak them with the tweakables in the menu, it's impossible to predict exactly where the center of mass is going to wind up. You can take an educated guess, but it's usually going to move a little bit forward or a little bit back, which means your VTOL craft is either going to be unstable on your initial takeoff or on your secondary takeoff when you are full of kethane, and then it is much heavier and creates a problem. So I decided to instead try to make a plane with enough power that it can just take off very quickly and keep the landing gear suspended enough that the extra weight of the kethane isn't going to cause a problem on the rocky takeoffs, which is the main problem I've been having with the fuel tankers, is actually getting them off the ground again at the remote site. Not as much problem as I did at the last mining base, where we had those incredibly huge mountains surrounding it, but even the small hills are giving you a lot of trouble. In order to combat the problems of the rocky terrain, I needed a vehicle with a huge thrust-to-weight ratio so that the extra kethane weight wouldn't be that much of a problem, and also needed to put those extra struts on the bottom to keep the landing gear separated from the body, because the landing gear has way too much play in it to be that close to the fuselage. If it's not on a runway, it's going to just dip and smash either your front or back ends into the ground, which creates a problem on rocky terrain. And also those struts can take a lot more damage than anything else. So once the first initial bit is done, I do a few test flights. I always start with my brakes on, because that will let me get up more speed quickly, which is very important on the non-runway takeoffs. This plane actually takes off by itself quite nicely. This gives me a lot of hope for the future takeoffs on rocky terrain, but unfortunately this design had the center of weight the center of lift much too far forward, which is why it's completely uncontrollable. So very obviously not going to work out with this particular design, though, as you'll see in a second, I have a surprisingly successful landing, and I very much blame that email for messing up my game and keeping me from landing better. But oddly enough, the plane does stay together pretty well in the landing. Then the K-turn messes it up a little bit, but over half the plane survived, which in Kerbal Space Program I think qualifies as a win. So like I said, the center of lift was much too far forward. I really did think it was further back than that, because obviously it's not going to control well. I do want to leave it a little bit, either a tiny bit forward or just enough on top of the center of mass, because once we add the keythane in, that's going to shift the center of mass forward slightly in this design, I believe. I did try to get the keythane tanks as close to the center of mass as possible, but unfortunately it's just not working out exactly the way I wanted in that regard. So it is going to move. You just really have to kind of plan for where the center of mass is going to be once your keythane is in, but unfortunately without the tweakables it's very difficult to tell. Now this particular design flaw was just a problem with the auto snapping. It works fine at the moment, but I didn't notice when I was in the hangar that I had forgotten and turned the auto snapping back on, which made that rear set of wings much too high up. They're slanted way too much for good control, and probably the center of weight is still a little bit off. But I do want the second wing slightly elevated in order to get a little more stability out of the thing. That will cause it to auto level after a turn if the wings are slightly up, but the auto snapping left them at much too high an angle. This just bugged me. I'm still not sure why those struts wound up way out there, but it is something that I was not going to stand for, and it's easily fixed anyway. And there's traffic. Authentic traffic noises for the building phase, for your viewing pleasure. I do apologize for some of the extra noise. It's summer, it's hot, I'm not closing the windows. So unfortunately, that does mean we're going to get some street noise on these. This is the final test flight, as it turns out. It wound up quite stable on this, and we're going to see a little bit of my testing pattern as we go through. So the rear set of wings, elevated slightly, gives it a lot more stability. And the, I believe, 12 engines that I have on the back is giving it enough thrust to weight that I can get quite a huge turn of speed. And this thing is actually much more maneuverable than I thought, putting it through a few paces. Since this is just a test flight, I really don't mind if I crash the thing. I just want to see how well it holds up. These designs, I never put them through enough testing around the base first, and they always tend to conk out either in the second leg of their flight or halfway back to base or something. Unfortunately, it was being a little hard to fly because I have so many little ships and things scattered around the base. I was hoping to buzz the tower, but it's not quite that maneuverable. I had to settle for a dip in between all the buildings there. And then I decided that a good test of an airplane will be to fly it out to the second airstrip there. Be a quick little trip, make sure everything works correctly over the ocean, and it doesn't fall out of the sky like some of the other designs. Now, since this is just a quick little trip, we're going to skip off to the island landing. Now able to come in on a nice glide and land here. I did not test it on I was considering taking off on one of the mountains after this, but I thought this was enough of a test run. The thing is remarkably stable, has some good speed, and should be the last fuel tanker I use. So, anytime I mention the tanker, it's going to be this one. I'll show a little bit of it, but I do have to make a couple of fuel runs for most of these missions. Unfortunately, with the conversion on Keythane, if I use even one yellow tank on my missions, that is probably 2 trips at least. So that's why I'm trying to conserve fuel until we get some of our off-Kerbin sites set up properly. Oh, if you want to see this plane in action a little bit anyway, stay tuned. The next Kerbal Fuel Crisis episode is in progress. I'm just having a little trouble getting back into the swing of things with some of my technical problems. But it's being made, it's in process. I really hope you will enjoy. Let me know if you like these build videos, and I can do some more little time lapses of those in between segments. In the meantime, I hope you enjoy the other things on the channel, and I will see you soon.